The main problem with using the argument that these tax cuts are only for the rich is that these tax cuts are for those who create jobs. We have a corporate tax rate of 35%, which the Democrats failed to mention is the second highest in the world. But going back to the original question about whether or not the Bush tax cuts should be repealed, I would say no, and I will tell you what, because in the 11th District of Virginia, the district that George Mason is in, if the Bush tax cuts were allowed to be expired, it would cost an average of over $3,000 in new taxes per family, and similar percentages throughout the rest of Virginia. Even Democrat Jerry Connolly, who represents this district in Congress, says that repealing the Bush tax cuts would be a disaster.
Also, I'd like to add, the top 1% of income earners are first-stage investors in small business. Due to this uncertainty of whether or not the Bush tax cuts are going to be voted on once again, the rich taxpayers are scaling back and investing in small companies. Because of this raises high inconvenience and uncertainty to small business owners, thus creating a domino effect. And as you should know, this does greatly affect each and every one of us. Why? Because it raises costs in the economy and discourages economic stimulation.
Exactly. Let me just point out this one phrase. I have never been employed by a workforce. I don't know if you have, but I mean, it really doesn't work at the end. You're getting paid by somebody who doesn't really have anything. No, it's not. That's backwards. That's communism. What we need to do is create the opportunity and incentives for big business and small business and government and medium-sized business, and frankly, students who want to go out and start a business to be able to become successful, pay down their student loans if they want to do that way, and create that sense of spirit and entrepreneurship that we need in America. We need that more than ever. I wish I had a way to pay a lot of. I have bills too. All of us have bills here, and so this evil Republican corporate shill thing. That's not going to work with us because I wish I could go to the bank and pay it off with one swipe, but I'm not even able to do that right now. What we need to do is create the opportunity for Americans, for students, to be able to succeed and become successful, and not take every single cent that they earn, or most of it, to get to the federal government. Just be able to make sure that they earn what they deserve.
And one final thing I wanted to add, the original number I mentioned of over $3,000 in new taxes per family doesn't include repealing the child tax credit and the marriage penalty tax credit, which would be repealed if the Bush tax cuts were allowed to expire.
Basically, we're not talking about repealing the entirety of the Bush tax cuts. Everybody who's in the bottom 98% would not see a tax increase, just like Barack Obama said. Basically, we have 847,000 private sector jobs created under Obama, and 673,000 private sector jobs lost under George Bush. This is supposed to create jobs. They have a funny way of doing it. And secondly, we are not communists.
Speak for yourself, all right?
Okay, very quickly, a couple points. First, your statistic that the average family leftist would pay $3,000 is a nice use of statistics, but that's average, not median. So of course the guy with a huge house out in Clinton is going to pay more in taxes compared to average to me. I live in a tiny townhouse out in Springfield. Of course, by average, we're going to pay $3,000. Me and Bill Gates, we have an average wealth of a gazillion.
Time. Republicans. In light of the continuing mortgage and housing crisis, should there be more regulation of the banking industry? Why or why not?
I'll take this. We should be able to create a sense of not just more regulation, but the right regulation. And case in point would be when Senator John McCain recommended in, I believe it was 2003 or something, to reform the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae GSEs to the point where they're able to become solvent. Now, the Democrats shot that down because their strongest bankers are the community organizers, possibly Barack Obama in that category, and corrupt Chris Dodd, who's not running for re-election, and all the rest of it, who actually want to go out and say, banks, you need to force people to get a house they may not be able to pay for. We don't believe in that. We believe that we should be able to provide people with sufficient and great housing, but do it to create a sense of community and engagement people who were able to pay for their houses. The sense of it is this: government should not necessarily be the only answer to housing. Yes, there was a bubble, and like all bubbles do, they burst. We need to make sure that we predict them and make sure that we regulate in order to prevent them if we can do that. The Democrats shut that down a few years back, and now we've seen the disastrous consequences of their actions. Josh, did you want to take? So we yield to the
Okay. I speak on my expertise of having only taken one economics class at Woodward Junior Community College. Yeah, go the Knights. You look at what happened. These banks took out all these mortgages that they knew were bad decisions, and yes, we can blame the people that bought them when they knew they couldn't afford them, but never underestimate a good salesman. Never ever underestimate a good salesman. A good salesman can sell anything and can use syringes to an HIV patient, for Christ's sake. But they persuaded these people. They persuaded them and said, yeah, you can afford this, you can afford this. They purposed it because they knew it would gain them economically in the short run. They knew it would do that. And they purposely took out these bad mortgages, knowing that it might all backfire, but they knew it was good for the short term. And what happened? The housing crisis and then the whole economic downturn. The idea that they don't need regulation is complete madness to me.
It's not just the mortgages. Obviously, our modern economic system is quite complex, but it's not just the mortgages. These banks were taking up these mortgages that were based on basically sand, chopping them up, selling them to each other using fraudulent deed transfers and title transfers, and then selling them to the general public and selling derivatives based off of the general public. Derivatives based on thin air, based on nothing of value. There were billions and billions of dollars being traded every single day on Wall Street on assets that were only tangentially linked to whatever's happening on the actual ground. We had a whole financial system that was based on thin air. So the idea that we would let banks get too big to fail, the idea that we would just let them regulate themselves, we would have a patchwork regulatory agency with the Office of Fair Supervision, we fight with the SEC, we fight with this other administration, we fight with this other agency. We had this patchwork of regulatory agencies, and nobody saw the bubble bursting. Nobody saw any of this coming. Take Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was issuing recommendations on their own assets. They were selling assets they knew were going to fail. So they were selling derivatives based on bets that the derivatives would fail. So they would sell these assets that were going to fail, and then make money on the fact they had failed. There was widespread fraud going on all around Wall Street because we let them run amok. I'm not saying the government should nationalize the bank system. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that there should be no such thing as too big to fail. There should be no such thing as banks selling assets that have no real value. There should be no such thing as this.
And just to elaborate on the too big to fail, I mean, these banks became these firms became so big that they were able to, that our economy became so dependent on them that we had no choice but to bail them out. Or else the economy would have gone completely haywire.
Okay, and well, the only thing I would say is, I don't know why you're lecturing us on the word too big to fail when that was the phrase that you used. The only other thing I would add is all these problems you listed with the housing bubble and the banks, if we had all these problems, how come the Democratic Party, the Democratic-controlled Congress, and Barack Obama bailed them out? They basically rewarded them for these failures.
They failed them.
Because we had no choice. They had a gun to the head of our economy and said, you're going to give us a bailout, we're going to shoot this guy. So
They held it hostage.
These were caused by systemic regulatory failures in the American economy, and we had to pick the pieces no matter what.
And the first one was Pat.